Hi everyone. We just had a beautiful week and my videographer has encouraged me to do the sermon outside today. So it's a wonderful evening and it's the 7th Sunday of Easter this weekend, and it's the last Sunday in the Easter season. Throughout this Easter season, we've been hearing some of the great readings from the book of Acts and from the Gospel of John. This weekend we hear the story of the Ascension from the book of Acts. After being with the disciples and giving them encouragement to carry on the ministry, Jesus departs from them. For the Gospel for this weekend, we hear Jesus praying. In this part of John's Gospel, Jesus is praying to God for the sake of the disciples. He knows that he's going to be gone soon, and so he's asking God to protect them as they continue the work of ministry in the world. Jesus is praying for them because he knows that doing ministry and living the message of love and forgiveness isn't easy, and it can often be dangerous. There are real forces at work that try to squash this message. And so Jesus prays, I am asking on their behalf. I am not asking on behalf of the world, but on behalf of those whom you gave me, because they are yours. All mine are yours, and yours are mine, and I have been glorified in them. And he continues to pray, saying, And now I am no longer in the world, but they are in the world, and I am coming to you. O God, protect them in your name that you have given me, so that they may be one as we are one. In this prayer, when Jesus talks about the world, he's not talking about our planet or creation. Our planet and all of God's universe is a beautiful creation and certainly remains so. No, in this prayer, he uses the word world to refer to the various structures and systems that we use to order human life. Our social system, our cultural system, our political structures and economic structures. He's referring to the human world. Now, these systems can be beneficial, but as we all know, far too often these systems can be used to create division, inequality, injustice, and greed. That is the world that Jesus is talking about, the human world. It is the world into which Jesus sent his disciples, and it remains the world in which we live and practice our faith. Jesus knows that the human world is often contrary and sometimes even opposed to God's desire for us. It can be opposed to God's desire for us to experience love and forgiveness and peace. That concern is the subject of his prayer in today's Gospel. In this reading, it is the evening of the Last Supper. Feet have been washed, supper is ended, the betrayer has left, and it's night. The darkness has descended upon the Garden of Gethsemane. The darkness of Jesus' impending death is near. The darkness of love being snuffed out is near. The darkness of the human world is at that moment close by. Jesus neither runs from nor fights the danger of the world. Instead, he offers a different way. He loves and prays and lays down his life in love. He prays for us, the ones who will continue his life and work in the world. We live in the world, but he prays that we do not belong to it. We belong to God, whom sent him to us. The great danger for us is that the darkness of the world will invade and fill and overtake our hearts. There are dark forces in the world, both in the material world and in the online virtual world these days. Like the Garden of Gethsemane, we need to be aware that these dark forces are nearby. What shall we do? Shall we give up and buy into business as usual in the human world? You hear that in phrases like, "Oh, what can I do? I'm only one person." Or, "That's just how it is. It's always been that way." Jesus' prayer, however, suggests that this is not how it's intended to be for us. It doesn't have to continue that way. God desires more for us. The unfolding of God's desire for us doesn't happen by opting out of the world. And the unfolding of God's desire happens in the midst of the world and its dangers. It's neither running away from the human world nor fighting it like a battle. Instead, we are called to give our lives to one another in love and service. Now, that's not easy to do. Jesus does not pray that it would be easy or that we would be taken out of the world. Instead, Jesus prays for our protection, for doing this work in the world. But our protection is not found in escaping or avoiding danger. The protection Jesus asks for comes through being embraced by the truth of God's love for us. Being embraced by the truth of God's love separates us from the usual human structures and systems of this world. We neither give up nor buy in. Instead, our lives are transformed. We live according to God's desire for human life. Things like love and mercy, forgiveness, beauty, wisdom, and generosity. Our protection comes from being embraced by the truth that these things are in the end far more valuable than all the products and distractions of this world and all that it has to offer. Knowing this truth shall set us free. It's not enough for us just to hear Jesus' prayer. It's a beautiful prayer, but it's not enough just to hear it. His words ask us to live, act, and work with God in answering this prayer. We are to actively participate in Jesus' prayer by shaping our life to be increasingly like His. So while we might easily say Amen to Jesus' prayer of protection for us, we must also examine our own hearts and ask ourselves some hard questions. You see, it's not just about what's out there in the world. It's also about what's in here in our hearts. What is our heart's orientation? How do we benefit, participate in, and sometimes foster the systems of the world that oppose God's desire? Are we willing to see this and look at it in ourselves? Do we operate out of our greeds and resentments? Do we operate out of a need to compete rather than cooperate? Are we always looking out for number one, living with an attitude of scarcity, prejudice, judgment, or hatred? Well, if we do, then we are saying no to God's desire for us. If we do, then we are actually contributing to the darkness of the world. That's not God's desire for us. It's not God's desire for the world. You, I, and all of humanity are worth so much more than that. The fact that Jesus gave His own life for us gives a good indication of that. As He departs from the disciples, as He departs from the material world, Jesus entrusts us to God's protection. And in part, the answer to Jesus' prayer rests in our own hands, our hearts, our choices. What shall we do? I say, offer forgiveness rather than retribution. Offer mercy instead of condemnation. Compassion rather than indifference. Give your life in service to one another. See life through the lens of beauty and not cynicism. Because in those moments, you will be living the Amen. You will be living the Amen of Jesus' prayer. In those moments, your heart will expand. In those moments, that little part of the world will be transformed. In those moments, you will be choosing God's desire for us. Amen.
Look behind you, Lord.